Hello friends, Tal here, and welcome to another Legion video. Today taking a look at the Vengeance Demon Hunter, the newest tank class added to the game here with the expansion, and my personal favorite tank out of all 6 of them. Now I do want to go ahead and take a quick moment to say I apologize for the upload schedule recently. I'm not really the type of person that wants to upload a bunch of fluff content, things that don't really focus on what I want to focus in here on my channel. But still, I haven't been uploading very often. It's been a mix of me trying to gear up 2 characters to be raid ready for Tuesday, which is when heroic raids come out, and then the next week when mythics come out, but as well as me just trying to get in the habit of doing my world quest, doing some personal stuff here in my life. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to stream it as often as I'd like, which sucks because of course I'm living in a house with a bunch of people. It's awful. Don't tell anybody. But anyways, today we're going to be taking a look at the Vengeance Demon Hunter. I want to go ahead and point out that I have put up an annotation here for every single part of the video. I've split it up into different parts. You can see talents, you can see stats, enchants, artifact path, things like that, legendaries, so that you can skip to whatever specific thing you want to see. But we're just going to go ahead and get right into it right now. So there's 2 things that you need to know before we go through this guide. Number 1, Vengeance Demon Hunter is my favorite tank spec out of all of them. I have a blast playing it. I think it's one of the best designed tank specs or specs in general in the game, and I love it. I'm biased. Number 2, it is not the best tank, okay? And it's important to be able to say that even though I love it, because it's not. It's really, really not. As much as its kit is fantastic, as much as it works when it needs to, and when you have some gear, everything goes fine. As much as all those things are true, it also is very squishy, and while it's not the worst tank in the world, it would be very, very difficult for me to say, yeah, I'm going to bring it into mythic rating and just be totally fine with that. And we're going to talk about why those things are and how it kind of plays with each other and how it works all together. So first things first, class mechanics. The Vengeance Demon Hunter is essentially what you get when you take a Protection Warrior and a Blood DK, mix little bits of both of them together, and you get Vengeance. What does that mean? It means that you have your resource generated by very spammable abilities that give you a small amount of resource every single time, but it's spammable. You get resources from taking damage, and a large part of your active mitigation or your tanking style is healing up after big hits and being able to manage your resources so that you have the healing when you need to, along with very, very powerful mitigation tools such as Fiery Brand, that are very, very strong cooldowns, but you need to know how the encounter is going to work because you want to use it before you get hit by it. Basically how it works. Very, very simple. That's the class mechanic in a very small little nutshell. But let's take a look at the spells. So first of all, you have Consume Magic, the best interrupt in the entire game. 20-yard range, 15-second cooldown. You get 50 pain when you interrupt a spell. Basically, you are going to be in every single interrupt rotation, and if you're not fighting to be in an interrupt rotation, you're doing it wrong. 50 of your resource for free every 15 seconds when you need to interrupt something is a fantastic tool. Don't look down on it. Don't let it pass you by. If there's something to interrupt, you want to be one of the people doing it. Maybe even the first. Maybe let your DPS Demon Hunters go first because they get the same deal on theirs, but you want to be in that rotation. Next up, you got Demon Spikes. It is your primary source of active mitigation. 20 pain. It's a recharge system. It has 2 charges, and is going to increase your parry chance by 20% and reduce physical damage you take by 40% for 6 seconds. Essentially, you use it on physical damage. You can sort of keep it up all the time, but it's not super necessary. But it specifically works on physical damage, and it's what you would use if say in a boss ability, saying, you know, if a tank has to have active mitigation up or he gets a dot on him, this is the active mitigation that they would be talking about. Next up, you have Immolation Aura. It is an AoE fire damage when you cast it, then it radiates fire damage every couple seconds. The most important part is it generates 20 pain over 6 seconds. That means you are going to use this ability even on single target because it's generating you resources. Now, Empower Wards is your magical damage reduction version of your active mitigation. 20-second cooldown, costs nothing, reduces magical damage taken by 30% for 6 seconds. Very easy, nothing too crazy to think about. Imprison is just a CC on a demon. Infernal Strike is your heroic leap alternative. 2 charges, 20-second recharge. You leap through the air. You do enough damage. Infernal Strike does enough damage that you want it in your rotation. When things are on cooldown, when you're not in danger of dying, you want to Infernal Strike. And although it shows you leaping up into the air, you can actually use abilities while you're doing it. So for example, I could leap into the air, use Fellblade, which is a talent, or leap into the air, use Demon Spikes. It's not locking you out of using other abilities. So keep that in mind. You want to keep that on rotation. Don't let it sit at 2 charges for a long period of time unless you very specifically need it for the encounter. And it does fire damage. Something to note. I'm going to point all this out. Fire damage and fire damage. Okay? Stay with me on that. Metamorphosis, your shield wall ability that does not actually reduce damage. 3-minute cooldown. You transform into a demon 15 seconds. You increase your current and maximum health by 30%, and it generates you 7 pain every 1 second. It's a fantastic cooldown. Kinda sucks that there's no damage reduction, but it's very, very powerful, and you can actually pop into Metamorphosis more often than just the cooldown of this, which we will again get into when we get into talents and artifact traits. But that's basically your big shield wall, like, oh, shit's going down cooldown. Then you have Fiery Brand. It is a 1-minute cooldown. Very, very short. And it does a shit ton of damage. You're going to brand an enemy. They're going to give a bunch of fire damage on them. And then you're going to reduce the damage that they do to you by 40% for 10 seconds. Extremely powerful cooldown. I can visibly see it chunk enemies when I use it. And the damage reduction is fantastic. Short cooldown. You want to use this all the time. Know when you're going to use this because it's just fantastic mitigation. You could even weave this in between Demon Spikes, so maybe you can't have Demon Spikes up all the time because you don't have the stats for it just yet, but you need to have mitigation up so you don't get trucked. Weave in a Fiery Brand, pay attention to when it lasts, how long it lasts, and then put in Demon Spikes right after. Shear is your spammable ability. You're going to use this when you have nothing else to use and you need to generate resources. It has a small chance to shatter a lesser soul fragment from your target. We will talk about lesser soul fragments in a bit, but they're basically little orbs around you that heal you, and it's going to generate you 10 pain every single time you use it. I'm not going to lie, guys, it can get spammy. The one negative thing I would say about the spec is that it is very, very spammy with shear, and it kind of sucks. It does. My finger starts to hurt. But you spam this when there's nothing else to use. This does physical damage, not fire damage. Then you have sigils. Your sigils are basically your utility. They're a great thing that they added to Vengeance that Havoc does not have, and personally it's one of my favorite things about the spec in general. So you have Sigil of Flame, which is going to be a rotational sigil. You're going to use this basically all the time, even sort of on single target. 30-second cooldown, 20-yard rage. You place a Sigil of Flame at your location that activates after 2 seconds. It deals fire damage and an additional fire damage dot to all enemies. Now, one thing to note about the sigils is that they are all targetable unless you take that talent I just had. Basically, you put this wherever you want. It spawns. It takes a few seconds to spawn, and then it does, and it goes off. One very important thing to know about the Vengeance Demon Hunter is that when you're using the sigils, you have to account for the activation time. It is not instant. You have to know that it's going to take some time if you're going to use it effectively. Now, continuing on, we will talk about Sigil of Chains when we get to talents. Sigil of Misery. It is a 1-minute cooldown. It activates after 2 seconds, and it's going to cause all enemies to be cowering in fear for 30 seconds. It disorient without them moving around. It does get canceled on damage. I've noticed it doesn't get canceled by immediate damage, but it does get canceled eventually. It's a fantastic way of CCing a group of mobs. And remember, Mythic plus Dungeons, I can just do this on 2 casters in the back, pull the rest of them, pull the rest of a pack, or I could leave a healer back there disoriented, completely negate them as a part of the trash pull that I'm doing. It's a great ability. In raids, probably won't be used as often, but for Mythic plus Dungeons, fantastic thing. And along with that is also Sigil of Silence. You place the sigil down, it's going to activate after 2 seconds and silence all enemies affected by 6 seconds. You can already see, and this is going to be something I probably mentioned multiple times, Vengeance Demon Hunters, along with Blood DKs, are quite possibly the best Mythic plus Dungeon tanks in the game. They just will be. They have the utility, they have the functionality, and they have the ways to abuse enemy mobs and CC and do all kinds of crazy stuff that's going to make them very, very highly valuable in that scene, that competitive scene when Mythic plus Dungeons are released and when it comes out, all that kind of stuff's going on. So, backing up a little bit, Spectral Sight, all Demon Hunters have this. This is actually going to let you see through physical barriers, see enemies. The cool thing about this is specifically in Vault of the Wardens, Cordana Fellsong, the last boss, she has an ability that causes a wall of green spirits to come at you, and you have to find the hole between the wall with a light object that you get on the boss fight. If you've done Vault of the Wardens, you know what I'm talking about. You can actually use Spectral Sight to see the hole. You don't need the light if you're a Demon Hunter. You can use a Spectral Sight. And in the Court of Stars, Mythic Dungeon, which is Suramar only, you can actually use Spectral Sight to find and locate the masquerade demon person that you need to interrogate to go ahead and talk. So keep that in mind. I don't know about any raid uses. I haven't done any raids. They're obviously not out yet. But keep in mind Spectral Sight, fantastic ability. It's going to have more uses than you can imagine. Just keep pressing it whenever you're in a weird place. Throwglaive, it's just high threat. It's going to hit three targets. It's not something you want to use rotational. It does a little bit of AoE damage. It's not a high priority, but it's good at pulling things and just giving you a little bit of a threat lead if you need that threat. Torment is your taunt. Nothing too crazy about that. You just cause it to come and attack you and generate extra threat or anything like that. It's not unique like the monk that makes it run faster or anything. Very standard taunt. Demonic Wards is a passive that you have. Your tattoos reduce magic damage by 10% and increase your stamina by 45% and your armor by 120%. You have baseline 10% magic damage reduction. With Empower Wards, it's an additional 30%. Even with those two things, you are susceptible to magic damage. Your active mitigation is not Ignore Pain, giving you an Absorb Shield. Okay? It's not, Shield of Righteous giving you a flat out 40%, 50% damage reduction. That's not how you work. You need to keep in mind that heavy, sustained magic damage will wreck your face. Keep in mind that you need to set up some sort of cooldown rotation or anything to keep yourself alive through that. Soul Carver is your artifact ability. It's a 40-second cooldown. It does fire damage and then a fire damage dot, and it's going to shatter 2 lesser soul fragments from the target and 1 additional lesser soul fragment every 1 second. You get 5 lesser soul fragments from this to immediately 3 over time. You can have up to a maximum of 5, sometimes 6, but that's rare, but 5 soul fragments out and about at any given moment. And again, we'll talk about that in just a second. You have double jump. Your mastery is Fellblood. Demon Spikes reduces physical damage taken by an additional amount and increases your attack power by an additional amount. Essentially, mastery is going to be very, very effective on physical damage reduction, or when you need that physical damage reduction. Doesn't do much for, magical survivability. And then Soul Cleave. Soul Cleave is where you get the healing portion of this spec, and it's very, very important. It's going to take between 30 to 60 pain. The more pain you use, the more healing, the more damage it does. So, it's an AoE ability in front of you, but the healing is very specifically based on the amount of pain and soul fragments that you consume when you use it, because it consumes all soul fragments within a 20 yards of you when you use it. So hitting more targets or less targets of Soul Cleave does not affect the heal. Don't worry about that. It doesn't work like that. But it's the main staple of your active mitigation. It's what you're going to be using constantly. You're going to be absorbing soul fragments all the time. And the only way to really save soul fragments would be to have to move out of the range so you can't see it. Now, you'll notice if you've been watching any of my content before, I have a weak aura that tracks my soul fragments. All those weak auras are on my weak aura video guide. I've updated everything. I've pasted them. You have all the information there if you want to go ahead and track it like that. But keep in mind the interaction between Soul Cleave and Soul Fragments. And then Shattered Souls, finally. When you kill a target, you can sometimes shatter their soul, leaving a soul fragment behind for 20 seconds. The soul fragment will be consumed when you approach it, healing you for a large amount, and consuming a demon soul will grant you 20% increased damage for 15 seconds. But your shear takes out lesser soul fragments. 5 lesser soul fragments equal 1 soul fragment. So it's not a lot of healing for the lesser ones, but you're not really trying to heal yourself for 500,000 every single time because you're going to overheal like crazy. Soul fragments is like a secondary resource that you have that goes along with pain. You want to track them, you want to keep them in mind, and you want to be aware that every time you use Soul Cleave, which you really should unless you're capping out on pain or you need the heal, you have to keep in mind that you will be using up all your soul fragments, and there's a lot of interactions that you have with them, especially once you get into the artifact tree. Keep in mind, soul fragments, basically a secondary resource. So there we go. Now, as far as stats go, your defensive stats, what you want to focus on if you're being purely defensive, is versatility and then haste. Those are your 2 biggest things. You want to go for as much versatility as you can and then as much haste as you can. Haste is going to reduce the cooldown on so many of your abilities, and versatility is going to give you a fantastic double dipping because of some artifact traits that we're going to talk about, but essentially you do some healing based on some fire damage that you deal. which with versatility, which increases your damage done and increases your healing done and reduces damage that you take, it synergizes beautifully with the spec. And it's one of those things, it's one of the reasons I love Vengeance. It's been designed from the ground up to not leech, but essentially leech. It's fire damage that you deal. A percentage of that will heal you. And it's something that you keep in mind when you're using abilities. Obviously, you have a rotation you want to keep in mind. You want to keep using things on cooldown. But maybe, just maybe, there's a pack of 5 ads that are about to spawn in this boss encounter. You're kind of at half health. Immolation Aura just came off cooldown, but you have to wait 3 seconds for those mobs to spawn. Maybe you hold off on using Immolation Aura. You wait for them to spawn. You get in between. You Immolation Aura. You hit them all with fire damage. You radiate fire damage to them, and you heal yourself up or give yourself a sustainable amount of healing through that. It's that kind of thought process, that kind of interaction between abilities that I adore and I think is fantastic and needs to exist more often in these games that we so love. But anyways, that's what you want to go ahead and do for stats. Versatility, haste. Your neck enchant will either be the armor one that procs, or for DPS you will take the Mark of the Claw, which is the haste crit proc. Heavy hide is the neck one. And besides that, you want to put agi on your cloak, and then versatility on your rings. Unless you just have a ton of versatility and no haste, then I would maybe suggest going into haste, but that's more specifically what your gear is. Just go versatility if you want to be safe. So with that, we will now go into talents. For the talents, you have some choices in some respects and not as many choices in others. For the first tier, you're basically pigeonholed into Agonizing Flames, increasing your movement speed by 30% when you use Immolation Aura, and making it deal 50% increased damage, which again is a survivability boost because of the fire damage trait that we're going to be talking about when we look at the artifact. Razor Spikes, it sounds like it would be good, but the problem is it's increased physical damage, and the truth of the matter is most of your hard-hitting things are not physical. They're just straight-up fire damage. So that's something to keep in mind. Abyssal Strike could be good when you combine it with Flame Crash, but even then, Agonizing Flames is just honestly the go-to. On the 100 tier, you have a couple choices, and it's very, very important to know what you're doing. Feast of Souls is just a straight-up survivability increase, especially on a single target. It just gives you an additional small, admittedly small, hot on your soul cleave every time you use it, which is nice. It's fantastic. It's not a great big deal, but it's nice. It's passive. It's just additional healing. Or you could take Fallout for AoE. It makes an Immolation Aura's initial burst. Remember, it bursts fire damage, then radiates fire damage. The burst has a chance to shatter lesser soul fragments from enemies, depending on how many enemies you're hitting. Honestly, in a pack of 3 or more, you use this, you get soul fragments for days. It's fantastic. And you want to keep in mind that this is the better option for AoE, and you just have soul fragments all over the place. Do not use Immolation Aura. If you have this talent and you have 5 soul fragments out, don't use Immolation Aura. You can't proc more than 5. You'll be wasting it. Spend the soul fragments, then pop Immolation Aura. Or Burning Alive. The interesting thing about Burning Alive is that it provides you your Fiery Brand. So let me just explain what it does. Every 2 seconds, your Fiery Brand deals fire damage and spreads from the primary target to a nearby enemy. Okay, so my Fiery Brand lasts for 10 seconds, but I believe that's only because of an artifact trait. So you're going to eventually get Demonic Flames, increases the duration of fire by 2 seconds. So baseline, your Fiery Brand is going to be doing 8 seconds, which means it's going to spread 4 times from the primary target to an additional thing around you. But once you get that artifact trait, which you will be going because that's the best route, it's going to spread 5 times. What this means is that on a minute cooldown, you can jump into a pack of AoE mobs that, honestly, as a Demon Hunter, it's going to hurt because you know you're a little bit squishier than other tanks. But you jump into them, you Immolation Aura, and after some time, it's not immediately, but after some time, everything around you is going to be doing 40% less damage to you. It's a very, very powerful thing, especially if you're talking burst AoE or scenarios like Mythic Plus Dungeons when you're pulling a bunch of stuff and you need to get this on your primary target and you make sure everything else around you doesn't deal as much damage. It's a very powerful talent. You have to know when you want to use it because admittedly Fallout's better for AoE, damage and, getting soul fragments, but this could be very, very powerful in specific scenarios, even in raids when you want to make 2 or 3 important mobs not, murder you instantly. You can use that there. And remember, it is going to do additional fire damage, which just synergizes even more and more and more. On the 102 tier, It's basically between Fellblade and Flame Crash. If you absolutely need a stun for whatever godforsaken reason, you take Fell Eruption. But understand, it is not the best choice. It does chaos damage. It stuns for 2 seconds. It costs pain. It's on a 35-second cooldown. It will deal an additional 100% damage against targets permanently immune to stuns. But even with that, you will not be doing more damage than if you take Fellblade on a single target, because Fellblade can reset. Fellblade is a 15-yard range charge attack. It's reduced by haste. It's going to deal fire damage. It's going to generate 20 pain, and Sheer has a chance to reset the cooldown of Fellblade. You basically end up using Fellblade all the time. I'll tell you right now, leveling up until 102 is hell, because once you get Fellblade, it makes it so much easier. You have so much more pain coming in. It's great. But Flame Crash is the AoE alternative. When you Infernal Strike, you cause a Sigil of Flame when you land. So what does this look like? Boom, Sigil of Flame. It does not put Sigil of Flame on cooldown. You can still use Sigil of Flame, and you can even have 2 of them up at the same time. Something to keep in mind though. The Sigil of Flame dots, because remember, it bursts fire damage, then puts a dot. It does not get just stacked and stacked and stacked. You don't want to use 3 of these all at once and stack the dot up, because it doesn't work like that. It'll just reset back to about 7 seconds according to pandemic rules, which is the way dots can get increased duration, but they don't just go infinitely up and up and up. Essentially, if you're doing an AoE pool, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start off the pool by doing something like, okay, Infernal Strike, Sigil of Flame is going, blah, blah, blah. It's lasting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Use the other one, and as the dot on the enemy is ending, boom, they just got another one. Couple seconds go by, a couple seconds, you do it again. As their dot is ending, boom, another one pops up. And that's the way you want to maintain it as long as you possibly can. Don't stack them all at once. It messes you up. You do less damage. But for AoE, Flame Crash for single target Fellblade, Fell Eruption if you absolutely need a stun. But I can't imagine a scenario where you or someone else can't have a stun. Outside of that, you don't have any stuns though, so keep that in mind. Now the 104 tier is a little more divisive, but I honestly think Soul Rending is just the only safe go-to one at the moment. So, Feed the Demon. Consuming a soul fragment reduces the remaining cooldown on demon spikes by 1 second. You can get to the point, especially if you have Fallout, where you can have demon spikes up all the time. It's a very powerful thing, but remember, it's only physical damage, and you don't have a lot of sustain for magic damage. You are not a warrior that can keep up shield block all the time, but also has shield, or not shield, but Ignore Pain, which is an absorption shield for the physical and the magical damage. You don't have that available to you. So while this is nice, it's specifically physical damage. Now Fracture is in a bit of a weird spot. It does enough damage that you can justify taking this to use your pain on instead of Soul Cleave. Like if you don't want to waste your pain on Soul Cleave because you don't need the healing, you want extra damage, yes, it can do additional damage. The problem though is Soul Cleave is AoE cleave. This is single target. It does generate 2 soul fragments, but soul fragments have a lot of lesser value than they did in the beta because they do less healing. They're not, interact as much as they used to. Fracture is a single target DPS boost, but it comes at a cost of a lot of pain. And even then, on 2 targets, Soul Cleave is just going to do more damage. So keep that in mind. What I would say the best is Soul Rending. You gain 50% leech while Metamorphosis is active. But there's a caveat there. If you do not have this artifact trait, which is Fueled by Pain, you have a chance to activate Metamorphosis for 5 seconds each time you consume a soul fragment. This actually procs all the time. All the time, especially if you're using Fallout. You can be in Metamorphosis just constantly. And that gives you the 30% extra health. That gives you the 7 pain a second. It's really, really great. It's fantastic. Again, another reason why everything synergizes just so well. But without that, this 50% leech is lackluster. It means that when you pop into Metamorphosis, like if you use Metamorphosis, yeah, you'll be able to heal yourself, you'll be fine, you'll be doing a bunch of damage, you don't have to worry about it. But it gains more benefit once you have the trait, because of course you'll be popping in and out, it'll give you additional healing on yourself. It's fantastic. I recommend Soul Rending once you get the trait. Before then, maybe Feed the Demon. Fracture is something you might want to play around with, but I wouldn't go to. It's not a defensive choice. It's not the go-to at this moment in time. Now, 106 is going to depend on what you're doing. Sigil of Chains is Mass Grip. Okay? It's a 1-minute cooldown Mass Grip. It activates after 2 seconds. Everything gets pulled to the center, and it gets snared, and their movement speed gets reduced by 70% for 6 seconds. It is smaller than Gorfine's Grasp. Okay, it has a delay, which Gorfine's Grasp does not have. You see the little circle there? All the sigils, by the way. Notice that the ring touches the sides of the wall, the rock, and this right there on the corner there. You will notice that the green circle does not touch those, but the targeting reticle touches both sides. Sometimes people have this thing where they think that it's actually a lot smaller than it really is. No, it's bigger. It's bigger than you would see, especially if you're, if you're not casting the sigil. If you're a DPS player, if you're a healer, you don't see how big that radius actually is. It's pretty huge. It's still going to be smaller than Gorfine's Grasp. It has a delay unlike Gorfine's Grasp, but this has a 1 minute cooldown. You are the only other spec in the entire game that has Mass Grip, and yours is on a 1 minute cooldown? This spell alone, to me, gives Demon Hunter equal value to DK. And I'm talking Mass Grip, Single Grip, and Battle Res from DK. Sigil of Chains by itself puts them on par with them, because you're not trying to pull everything from the freaking world. You're pulling a specific amount of things into the center to DPS down or stun or interrupt. You add in the rest of the sigils, and it just elevates Demon Hunter even more. So if there's a scenario in a dungeon or a raid that you need to Mass Grip, you take Sigil of Chains. Otherwise, you have Quickened Sigils, which is going to make them activate 1 second faster, and the cooldown is reduced by 20%, or Concentrated Sigils, which is going to make them target at your location and increase the duration of the effects by 2 seconds. The problem with Concentrated Sigils is the whole point of the sigil system and why they're so good is you can target where they are. With this, you can't target it. It happens at your feet. It's either great for you or it's bad for you. When I'm messing around, I'm leveling, or I'm doing world quests, I like this because it takes another button press away from me. But in most scenarios that you don't need Sigil of Chains, you're going to use Quickened Sigils because it just makes them activate faster and the cooldown gets reduced. Just the better choice. Sigil of Chains when you need them, Quickened Sigils when you're doing other content, this when you're by yourself. Then you move over to the 108 tier. You have Fell Devastation, 30 pain, it's a channeled ability, 1 minute cooldown. You will unleash the Fell within you. You're going to be dealing a bunch of fire damage, again, fire damage, over 1.8 seconds to enemies in front of you, but causing damage also heals you for up to 700k. It depends on how many targets you're hitting, is the heal. I've noticed that you do need a lot of targets so that you can get a big, massive heal. But it's a burst healing, burst damage, burst fire damage ability. And it's honestly in the tier, it's one of my favorite choices. It's probably the best choice in this tier. Then you have Blade Turning. Parrying an attack increases the pain generation of your next shooter by 50%. While this is nice and it does proc often, it's really not that big of a deal. You get more soul cleaves, yes, but for the benefit of the additional pain and everything, when you're comparing it to things like Fell Devastation or even Spirit Bomb, it lags behind. It's not something you're really going to want to take. Perhaps if you're taking Feed the Demon and it's all physical damage, maybe it'll come out ahead there, or you can't afford to sit there and channel, or you're really not doing too many soul fragments for Spirit Bomb, maybe it'll go ahead there, but as of right now, it's not the best. Then you have Spirit Bomb. Now, the interesting thing about this is I really, really like the design intention behind this ability, but I don't think it functions well at all in realistic scenarios. Every time that I've ever tried to use this ability, it's just not done enough for me to care about it. It doesn't do enough healing for me to care about it, and I'm at a weird place with this. So let's see what it does. You launch a nearby soul fragment at your target, dealing some shadow damage, so not even fire, but shadow damage to all nearby enemies and afflicting them with frailty for 15 seconds. You heal for 10% of all damage you deal to enemies with frailty. So again, it's giving you that additional leech. It's synergizing of all your abilities again. It's shadow damage, so it sadly doesn't benefit from that 50% heal, but it's still going to be giving you 10% of all damage you deal to them. The problem with it is couple-fold. First of all, it's unresponsive as hell. I've had, soul fragments just sitting there, and I'm spamming this ability, and finally one launches itself over there. And more often than not, I find myself just doing my normal rotation, pressing Spirit Bomb, pressing Spirit Bomb, pressing Spirit Bomb, then I soul cleave because I need to heal. Oh, none of my soul fragments went into Spirit Bomb because it was being unresponsive. Now they're all gone. Now the buff is dropped and everything else. It's a pain in the ass. I wish this did a little bit more. I wish it was maybe 15 or 20% of all damage you deal to enemies of frailty. The important thing to know is it is all damage, so it's physical, it's fire, it's the shadow damage, it's everything, not just fire. So maybe that's why it's only 10%. But in most scenarios, I just don't see the benefit of this healing. But the important thing to know, it is sustained healing versus the Fell Devastation burst healing. It's a difficult tier. Honestly, I want Spirit Bomb to do well, but in practice, I just have not had it function well at all. In no scenario. Time will tell with that. And then the 110 tier is a bit of a funny joke because at the end of the day, Last Resort is just the go-to. Last Resort is purgatory without any negative consequences. Sustaining fatal damage instead transforms you to Metamorphosis form and returns you to 30% health. It can occur every 3 minutes. This synergizes with Soul Rending because it's going to be giving you the 50% leech. So when you drop down to 30%, you can then heal yourself back up enough to get saved. You can use it to cheese specific mechanics. There's a boss in Blackrock Cold that will, it's the big demon guy that chooses a ranged character and charges at them. And if you've had 2 stacks of that, you basically die on Mythic. I can cheese that. I can do 4 or 5 stacks of Last Resort. If you die, the debuff goes away. You could be battle rezzed and you can Last Resort proc again. It's a fantastic ability. It saves your life. If it's never procking, it kind of sucks because it feels like you have a wasted talent. But specifically in raid scenarios, when you're doing raid progression, if this proc saves your life, it's going to be great. No reason not to take that. You have Nether Bond, which is a nice tank cooldown and actually very similar to the legendary tank ring from Warlords. You bind yourself to a friendly player for 15 seconds. You and that target share health, and the health is redistributed so that you're at the same percentage of maximum health, 2-minute cooldown. Very cool. It's going to be used in specific scenarios, especially when you don't have to worry about Last Resort, needing Last Resort to save your life. I could see you could even use this on normal encounter mechanics where maybe you don't need to use this on a tank. You want to use it on the mage that's soaking an ability because you want to keep them alive. I see Nether Bond having a lot of uses. And then you have Soul Barrier, which again is another one that in practical scenarios and real world stuff, I just haven't seen this be useful. And I think that the math behind it right now, it means that it's a little bit lacking. It's a little behind the other choices here. Maybe it needs a little bit of a buff. But 30 pain, 20-second cooldown. You shield yourself for 8 seconds, absorbing up to a certain amount of damage. Consuming a soul fragment adds an additional amount to the shield. The absorption cannot be reduced a specific amount, and it consumes all soul fragments within 20 yards. Basically, you need to absorb for this big, massive hit that the boss is going to do. You use this, you consume all the soul fragments. It's very similar to Soul Cleave. It does not replace it, but instead of having to heal and waste it, you absorb all that. You turtle up for it, boom, you take the hit, you're good to go. Move forward. The only reason it can't be reduced between a certain amount is because if you use it and immediately within the first second it goes away, at least every single hit after that for the rest of the 7 seconds will have 56,000 of it removed and absorbed, which is just a fantastic thing. It's nice. It's a good ability. Honestly, I really, really like it. I like the dichotomy between Soul Cleave, just healing you up, versus Soul Barrier, preventing that damage to begin with. Both of them using your soul fragments again as that resource. I think it's a good spell. It just needs a little bit of a buff numbers-wise. And because of how squishy you are and because of how amazing Metamorphosis is, Last Resort just rises above the other two in the current state of the game. Remember that I'm recording this before raids are even released. They're going to be out on Tuesday. It is Saturday now. So keep all that in mind. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the artifact. The artifact is the Eldrachi or Eldrachi, whatever you want to say, Warblades. It has a Iron, Arcane, and Fel relic slot. And the base model is pretty shit, but the other versions of it are actually really, really cool. Essentially, your artifact path is very, very simple. You move up into Tormented Souls, which is going to increase the damage of Soul Cleave. It's the first one that you put a point into. You move into Shatter Souls, which is going to increase the chance for a soul fragment to be shattered with Sheared when you're below 50% health. You move over to Siphon Power, which is going to let Empower Wards increase your agility by up to 15% for 10 seconds based on magic damage you take. It's just a nice bonus. If you can get away with using Empower Wards more often and soaking some magic damage without getting killed just for the increased agility, go ahead and do that. But specifically when you're shielding against big tank magic damage stuff, it's just going to give you some agility. It's a nice free damage boost. You go into Fiery Demise, which is going to make Fiery Brand also increase the fire damage you do to the target by 50%. Keep that in mind. That's extra healing. That's extra damage that you do. So much of your abilities are fire damage. Know which ones are. Use Firebrand. Spam some fire damage abilities into it if you need the heal, or spam some fire damage abilities into it if you need that thing to die. Remember, I've said when you put Firebrand on something, I've noticed it chunk people's health. Or people or enemies, anything like that. It does a lot of damage. And then you go into Fueled by Pain. That's your first Golden Dragon trait. You have a chance to activate Metamorphosis 5 seconds every time you consume a soul fragment. It procs all time. It's a fantastic ability. Very, very important to get. Then you move down into Aldraki Design, increase your parry chance. Boring, Demonic Flames, increase the duration of Firebrand, which is going to make that buried or burned alive talent that I was talking about that makes Firebrand spread. It's going to make that a little bit more viable. Also just increasing the amount of time that it's up so you have more damage reduction time. Then you get Aura of Pain, increases the damage dealt by Emulation Aura. And your second Golden Dragon is Charred Warblades. You heal for 50% of all damage that fire damage that you deal. I'm not going to lie, it takes a long time to get to this. And as soon as I got it, I noticed it was a very noticeable survivability sustain increase. Until that point, I was a little bit squishy, you drop up and down. But once you have this and you use your abilities intelligently, you do feel a little more tanky. Once you get to there, you basically transition up here. You go into Infernal Force, which is just increase the damage of Infernal Strike. And then you take Devour Souls, making Soul Cleave heal for an additional 3%. Very, very, very important. Then you move over to Defensive Spikes, which is just going to increase your chance to parry by an additional 10% for the first 3 seconds after activating Demon Spikes. You go into Embrace the Pain, increasing the maximum health gain from Metamorphosis by an additional 5%. And then your last Golden Dragon trait is Painbringer. Each soul fragment you consume reduces all damage you take by 3% for 4 seconds. You're consuming soul fragments all the time. It's going to add a nice damage reduction defensive benefit to it. Honestly, all of your Golden Dragon traits are pretty cool, pretty important, pretty necessary. And I want you to know, though, it takes a long time to get this. Oh, my God. Once you get past 13, every single artifact point costs so much, it gets ridiculous. But, again, once you move, so you've already cleared all this that I have, then you get these two, then you get this, and then finally you put points into Will the Illidari and Honed Warblades. Whichever one of those two you want, doesn't matter. They're both the last two ones that you want to go ahead and get. You pick those up, and you are done. So, the other thing I want to go ahead and talk about is the legendaries for the Vengeance Demon Hunter, because it is a couple of very interesting ones. Now, you have the neck available to you that gives you Absorb Shield after 5 seconds of not taking damage, which is nice on taunt swamps. If not, then, it's a wasted legendary, honestly. You have the shoulders, which causes Metamorphosis to reset the remaining cooldown on all your sigils, which will be absolutely broken with, Sigil of Chains, things like that. I do not know if that counts when you randomly proc into Metamorphosis when you have Fueled by Pain. I don't know if that works. I haven't been able to test it. I don't have a legendary on my Demon Hunter. If it does, shit. If it doesn't, thank God. But if it does work, I don't even know how that can possibly be balanced. I don't have a response besides shit. Cloak of Fell Flames, though, is probably going to be the one that most people are going to go to. It has your 2 best stats, and it's going to make you take 15% reduced magic damage while Immolation Aura is active. Obviously, you want to have it up all the time, but it gives you another choice. You're taking a lot of heavy magic damage. You pop this, then you pop Empower Wards, or you even pop them together to completely negate magic damage. Fantastic legendary. Very, very powerful. Then you go into the wrist. Soul Cleave reduces the remaining cooldown on a random sigil by 8 seconds. This can be gamed. It reduces it on a random sigil that's obviously on cooldown, which means Soul Cleave or Sigil of Chains can be, shorter than a minute. I don't have a response to that besides holy shit, they're the best mask grippers in the entire game, and I will say it every single day. Fantastic again. Then you have the waist that causes your attacks cause an additional 30% damage as physical to enemies above 90%. Fuck that. Feat that the instant initial damage from your Immolation Aura reduces the remaining cooldown on Firebrand by 2 seconds for each enemy hit. Firebrand already OP. If you combine this with the talent that makes Firebrand spread, and then you use this, it's going to reduce it even more. You get Firebrand up all the time. You become an AoE killing monster if you get this legendary. If you get the legendary, which again, legendaries, guys, I'm going over it because it's important that you guys know about how they work if you happen to get one, not because you're guaranteed to get one. Especially with the recent hotfixes they've had of legendaries, that's a gigantic mess. But that's why I go over this. Then you have the ring, which is going to successfully applying a loss of control effect to an enemy, grants you 70% increased movement speed, 15% haste. I mean, I guess the disorient works for that, but other than that, I mean, I would feel bad if you got that ring, honestly. And then you get the Fragment of Betrayer's Prison, gain 15% leech while Demon Spikes is active. You can have Demon Spikes up almost all the time. That's just a flat out 15% additional leech. that is ridiculously strong. Very powerful legendary. You honestly have a lot of good ones as a Vengeance Demon Hunter. They can mix and match depending on the encounter. This would be great for in general, this one would be great, but especially if it's a physical damage fight, you can just keep Demon Spikes up all the time. You can build your talents around it so you can have the 15% leech all the time. You don't need the cloak if you're obviously not taking magic damage. Vengeance Demon Hunter legendaries are awesome. I wish I had some so I can test them and just play with them and have fun with that, but I don't, and that is the unfortunate truth of that life. But anyways, guys, that has been my basic guide here to the Vengeance Demon Hunter. It's a little bit long, it's a little bit boring. I have to go over every single aspect of it. I need to explain to you guys what the different combinations are, the way that it works, the mechanics of the spec. It's important to know. It's a brand new tank class. It's my favorite tank class, and I wanted to give it all the attention, love, and time that it required. Now, so anyways, guys, I'm going to be recording a dungeon run right after this. Some people like to have all the explanations just showed to them. They're like, these are the talents, these are the artifact traits. Other people like to see it be in action. So I'm going to be recording that next. Again, I'm trying to space out this content. I'm trying to get this out to you. It's important to me that I really play these tanks before I tell you anything about it. I don't want to be that one guy that did 2 dungeons. It's like, oh, I know how it works now. No, I'm doing the mythics. I'm making sure that I have that knowledge in me, and I'm giving you that content. I hope you guys like this video. I hope it helped you out if you're trying to learn how to Vengeance Demon Hunter. And look forward to more content coming out soon. I appreciate the shit out of all of you. Thank you so much. You're helping me make my dreams come true. See you guys around. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and drop it a like. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content just like this. And I want to thank the time each and every single one of you took out of your day to go ahead and watch this, as well as a very special thank you to my Patreon patrons who continue to make this dream a reality through their monthly continued support. If you'd like to go ahead and become a Patreon patron, you can go ahead and click right there on the logo. It'll take you right to the page. And other than that, you can go ahead and tweet me or follow me at Tauriel here on Twitter. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, fantastic day. See you guys around.
Turns to gray, we'll calmly walk away from the fray. When structure falls and all else fails,